Good morning, children. Today we're going to continue with the chapter The Making of a Global World from History. Okay, we'll get it started now. Synopsis. So, the topics that are to be covered in the session are the Great Depression, India and the Great Depression, and third one, rebuilding a world economy, the post war era. Next, post war settlement and the Bretton Woods institutions. Next, the early post-war years. Sixth one, decolonization and independence. The last one, end of Bretton Woods and the beginning of globalization. The Great Depression. The Great Depression began around 1929 and lasted till the mid 1930s. During this period, most parts of the world experienced catastrophic declines in production, employment, incomes, and trade. The exact timing and impact of the depression varied across countries, but in general, agricultural regions and communities were the worst affected. This was because the fall in agriculture prices was greater and more prolonged than that in the prices of industrial goods. Okay, children, listen here. The Great Depression began around 1929 and it continued till 1930s. And during this period, most parts of the world experienced catastrophic declines in production, employment, incomes, and trade. The meaning of catastrophic is involving or causing sudden great damage or suffering. If you see the timing, the exact timing and impact of the depression varied across countries, but in general, agricultural regions and communities were the worst affected. And if you see the agricultural regions and the communities, they were the worst affected. It was because the fall in agriculture prices was greater and more prolonged than that in the prices of industrial goods. The agriculture regions, they were the most affected because the fall in agriculture prices was greater. And if you compare that with the industrial goods, the agriculture prices was greater than the prices of industrial goods. Here you can see the picture of a migrant agriculture workers family, homeless and hungry during the Great Depression. Many years later, Dorothy Lange, the photographer who shot this picture, recollected the moment of her encounter with the hungry mother. And here she shares the conversation she had with that hungry mother. She says that, I saw and approached the hungry and desperate mother as if drawn by a magnet. I did not ask her name or her history. She told me her age, that she was 32. She said that they had been living on frozen vegetables from the surrounding fields and birds that the children killed. There she sat with her children huddled around her and seemed to know that my pictures might help her, and so she helped me. So, this was the conversation she had with that hungry mother. So, this was recorded by Dorothy Lange. She was a photographer. The depression was caused by a combination of several factors. We have already seen how fragile the post-war world economy was. First, agriculture overproduction remained a problem. This was made worse by falling agriculture prices. As prices slumped and agriculture incomes declined, farmers tried to expand production and bring a larger volume of produce to the market to maintain their overall income. This worsened the glut in the market, pushing down prices even further. Farm produce rotted for a lack of buyers. Okay, children, listen here. A combination of several factors led to the depression. We have already seen how fragile the post-war world economy was. The first problem was agricultural overproduction remained a problem. This was made worse by falling agriculture prices. As prices slumped and agriculture incomes declined, farmers tried to expand production and bring a larger volume of produce to the market to maintain their overall income. So the farmers wanted to increase their production. So
in order to maintain their overall income. They had thought this way because of the fall in the agriculture prices, right? So they thought that if they increase their agriculture production, they can at least maintain their overall income. But this worsened the glut in the market, pushing down prices even further. As production increased, the prices even went down and the farm produce rotted for a lack of buyers. There was no buyers to buy their products. Second, in the mid 1920s, many countries financed their investments through loans from the US. While it was often extremely easy to raise loans in the US when the going was good, US overseas lenders panicked at the first sign of trouble. In the first half of 1928, the US overseas loans amounted to over $1 billion. A year later, it was one quarter of that amount. Countries that depended crucially on US loans now faced an acute crisis. Okay, children, as you can see here, the second major problem was during mid 1920s, many countries they financed their investments through the loans they got from US. And this was going on well, and in the first half of 1928, US overseas loans amounted to over $1 billion. And a year later, it was one quarter of that amount. So, due to this, countries that depended crucially on US loans, they now faced an acute crisis because they could not get any more loans from US overseas. The withdrawal of US loans affected much of the rest of the world, though in different ways. In Europe, it led to the failure of some major banks and the collapse of currencies such as the British pound sterling. In Latin America and elsewhere, it intensified the slump in agricultural and raw material prices. The US attempt to protect its economy in the Depression by doubling import duties also dealt another severe blow to world trade. The US was also the industrial country most severely affected by the Depression. With the fall in prices and the prospect of a depression, US banks had also slashed domestic lending and called back loans. Farms could not sell their harvests, households were ruined, and business collapsed. Faced with falling incomes, many households in the US could not repay what they had borrowed and were forced to give up their homes, cars, and other consumer durables. The consumerist property of the 1920s now disappeared in a puff of dust. So here you can see that US was also the industrial country most severely affected by the depression. So US also got affected by depression. With the fall in prices and the prospect of a depression, what happened? US banks they slashed domestic lending and they called back loans. Farms could not sell their harvest, households were ruined, and business collapsed. Faced with falling incomes, many households in the US they could not repay what they had borrowed and they were forced to give up or sell their homes, cars, and other consumer durables. As unemployment soared, people trudged long distances looking for any work that they could find. Ultimately, the US banking system itself collapsed. Unable to recover investments, collect loans, and repay depositors, thousands of banks went bankrupt and were forced to close. The numbers are phenomenal. By 1933, over 4,000 banks had closed, and between 1929 and 1932, about 110,000 companies had collapsed. By 1935, a modest economic recovery was underway in most industrial countries, but the Great Depression's wider effects on society, politics, and international relations and on people's mind proved more enduring. This is the picture which shows people lining up for unemployment benefits, US, and this was the shot taken by Dorothy Lange. When an unemployment census showed 10 million people out of work, the local government in many US states began making small allowances to the unemployed. These long queues came to symbolize the poverty and unemployment of the Depression years. India and the Great Depression. In the 19th century, as you have seen, colonial India had become an exporter of agricultural goods and importer of manufactures. The depression immediately affected Indian trade. India's exports and imports nearly half between 1928 and 1934. As international prices crashed, prices in India also plunged. Between 1928 and 1934, wheat prices in India fell by 50%. Okay, children, if we look at the impact of the depression on India, we realize how integrated the global economy had become the earlier 20th century. The tremors of a crisis in one part of the world were quickly relayed to other parts, affecting lives, economies, and societies worldwide. And in the 19th century, as you have seen, colonial India had become an exporter of agricultural goods and also an importer of manufactures. Due to this, the depression immediately affected Indian trade. So India's exports and imports nearly half between 1928 and 1934. As international prices crashed, prices in India also plunged. Between 1928 and 1934, wheat prices in India fell by 50%. Peasants and farmers suffered more than urban dwellers. Though agriculture prices fell sharply, the colonial government refused to reduce revenue demands. Peasants producing for the world market were the worst hit. Across India, peasants' indebtedness increased. They used up their savings, mortgaged lands, and sold whatever jewelry and precious metals they had to meet their expenses. So, see here, children, if you can compare the peasants and farmers and with that of the urban dwellers, peasants and farmers suffered more than the urban dwellers. Though agriculture prices fell sharply, the colonial government refused to reduce revenue demands. Peasants producing for the world market were the worst hit. Consider the jute producers of Bengal. They grew raw jute that was produced in factories for export in the form of gunny bags. But as gunny exports collapsed, the price of raw jute crashed more than 60%. Peasants who borrowed in the hope of better times or to increase output in the hope of higher incomes faced ever lower prices and fell deeper and deeper into debt. Thus, the Bengal jute growers lament. So they were lamenting as they have seen the great loss. The Bengal jute growers, they are lamenting as grow more jute, brothers, with the hope of great cash. Costs and debts of jute will make your hopes get dashed. When you have spent all your money and got the crop off the ground, traders sitting at home will pay only rupees 5 amount. So this was the lament by the Bengal jute growers. Across India, peasants' indebtedness increased. What happened? They used up their savings, mortgaged lands, and sold whatever jewelry and precious metals they had to meet their expenses. So the peasants and farmers, they had to use up their savings and even sell up their lands and sold their jewelries in order to meet their expenses. In these depression years, India became an exporter of precious metals, notably gold. The famous economist John Maynard Keynes thought that Indian gold exports promoted global economic recovery. They certainly helped speed up Britain's recovery, but did little for the Indian peasant. Rural India was thus seething with unrest when Mahatma Gandhi launched the civil disobedience movement at the height of the Depression in 1931. The depression proved less grim for urban India. Because of falling prices, those with fixed incomes, say town dwelling landowners who received rents and middle class salaried employees, now found themselves better off. Everything cost less. Industrial investment also grew as the government extended tariff protection to industries under the pressure of nationalist opinion. Rebuilding a world economy, the post-war era. The Second World War broke out a mere 2 decades after the end of the First World War. It was fought between the Axis powers, mainly Nazi Germany, Japan and Italy, and the Allies, Britain, France and the Soviet Union and US. It was a war waged for 6 years on many fronts, in many places, over land, on sea, in the air. Once again, death and destruction was enormous. At least 60 million people, or about 3% of the world's 1939 population, are believed to have been killed, directly or indirectly, as a result of the war. Millions more were injured. Unlike in earlier wars, most of these deaths took place outside the battlefields. Many more civilians than soldiers died from war-related causes. Vast parts of Europe and Asia were devastated and several cities were destroyed by aerial bombardment or relentless artillery attacks. The war caused an immense amount of economic devastation and social disruption. Reconstruction promised to be long and difficult. This picture here shows German forces attacked Russia July 1914. Hitler's attempt to invade Russia was a turning point in the war. Two crucial influences shaped post-war reconstruction. The first was the US emergence as the dominant economic, political and military power in the Western world. The second was the dominance of the Soviet Union. It had made huge sacrifices to defeat Nazi Germany and transformed itself from a backward agriculture country into a world power during the very years when the capitalist world was trapped in the Great Depression. So listen here children, there were two crucial influences which shaped the post-war reconstruction. First one was the US emergence as the dominant economic, political and military power in the Western world. So in the Western side, US became the superpower as the dominant economic, political and military power. And second, it was the dominance of the Soviet Union. It had made huge sacrifices to defeat Nazi Germany and transformed itself from a backward agriculture country into a world power during the very years when the capitalist world was trapped in the Great Depression. This picture here shows Stalingrad in Soviet Russia devastated by the war. Next topic, post-war settlement and the Bretton Woods institutions. Economists and politicians drew two key lessons from interwar economic experiences. First, an industrial society based on mass production cannot be sustained without mass consumption. But to ensure mass consumption, there was a need for high and stable incomes. Incomes could not be stable if employment was unstable. Thus, stable incomes also required steady, full employment. But markets alone could not guarantee full employment. Therefore, governments would have to step in to minimize fluctuations of price, output, and employment. Economic stability could be ensured only through the intervention of the government. The second lesson related to a country's economic links with the outside world. The goal of full employment could only be achieved if governments had power to control flows of goods, capital and labor. Thus, in brief, the main aim of the post-war international economic system was to preserve economic stability and full employment in the industrial world. Its framework was agreed upon at the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference held in July 1944 at Bretton Woods in New Hampshire, USA. The Bretton Woods Conference established the International Monetary Fund (IMF) to deal with external surpluses and deficits of its member nations. The International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, popularly known as the World Bank, was set up to finance post-war reconstruction. The IMF and the World Bank are referred to as the Bretton Woods institutions or sometimes the Bretton Woods twins. The post-war international economic system is also often described as the Bretton Woods system. The IMF and the World Bank commenced financial operations in 1947. Decision making in these institutions is controlled by the Western industrial powers. The US has an effective right of veto over key IMF and World Bank decisions. The international monetary system is the system linking national currencies and monetary system. The Bretton Woods system was based on fixed exchange rates. In this system, national currencies, for example the Indian rupee, were pegged to the dollar at a fixed exchange rate. The dollar itself was anchored to gold at a fixed price of $35 per ounce of gold. The early post-war years. The Bretton Woods system inaugurated an era of unprecedented growth of trade and incomes for the Western industrial nations and Japan. World trade grew annually at over 8% between 1950 and 1970 and incomes at nearly 5%. The growth was also mostly stable without large fluctuations. For much of this period, the unemployment rate, for example, averaged less than 5% in most industrial countries. These decades also saw the worldwide spread of technology and enterprise. Developing countries were in a hurry to catch up with the advanced industrial countries. Therefore, they invested vast amounts of capital importing industrial plant and equipment featuring modern technology. Okay children, see here, the Bretton Woods system helped in the growth of trade and incomes for the Western industrial nations, and in Japan, world trade grew annually at over 8% between 1950 and 1970 and incomes at nearly 5%. And these decades also saw the worldwide spread of technology and enterprises. So there was development in technology. Developing countries were in a hurry to catch up with the advanced industrial countries. Therefore, they invested vast amounts of capital importing industrial plant and equipment featuring modern technology. And have you heard about MNCs? What are MNCs? Multinational corporations. MNCs means multinational corporations. MNCs are large companies that operate in several countries at the same time. The first MNCs were established in the 1920s. Many more came up in the 1950s and 1960s as US business expanded worldwide and Western Europe and Japan also recovered to become powerful industrial economies. The worldwide spread of MNCs was a notable feature of the 1950s and 1960s. This was partly because high import tariffs imposed by different governments forced MNCs to locate their manufacturing operations and become domestic producers in as many countries as possible. What do you mean by tariff? Tariff means tax imposed on a country's imports from the rest of the world. Tariffs are levied at the point of entry, that is, at the border of the airport. Next topic, decolonization and independence. When the Second World War ended, large parts of the world were still under European colonial rule. Over the next 2 decades, most colonies in Asia and Africa emerged as free, independent nations. They were, however, overburdened by poverty and a lack of resources, and their economies and societies were handicapped by long periods of colonial rule. The, the IMF and the World Bank were designed to meet the financial needs of the industrial countries. They were not equipped to cope up with the challenge of poverty and the lack of development in the former colonies. But as Europe and Japan rapidly rebuilt their economies, they grew less dependent on the IMF and the World Bank. Thus, from the late 1950s, the Bretton Woods institutions began to shift their attention more towards developing countries. As colonies, many of the less developed regions of the world had been part of the Western empires. Now, ironically, as newly independent countries facing urgent pressures to lift their populations out of poverty, they came under the guidance of international agencies dominated by the former colonial powers. Even after many years of decolonization, the former colonial powers still controlled vital resources such as minerals and land in many of their former colonies. Large corporations of other powerful countries, for example the US, also often manage to secure rights to exploit developing countries' natural resources very cheaply. At the same time, most developing countries did not benefit from the fast growth the Western economies experienced in the 1950s and 1960s. Therefore, they organized themselves as a group, the Group of 77 or G77, to demand a new international economic order, NIEO, which means New International Economic Order. By the NIEO, they meant a system that would give them real control over their natural resources, more development assistance, fairer prices for raw materials, and better access for their manufactured goods in developed countries' markets. Next topic, end of Bretton Woods and the beginning of globalization. Despite years of stable and rapid growth, not all was well in this post-war world. From the 1960s, the rising cost of its overseas involvements weakened the US finances and competitive strength. The US dollar now no longer commanded confidence as the world's principal currency. It could not maintain its value in relation to gold. This eventually led to the collapse of the system of fixed exchange rates and the introduction of a system of floating exchange rates. Here, exchange rates means they link national currencies for purposes of international trade. There are broadly two kinds of exchange rates, fixed exchange rate and floating exchange rate. And fixed exchange rates means when exchange rates are fixed and governments intervene to prevent movements in them. And the next type, flexible or floating exchange rates, means these rates fluctuate depending on demand and supply of currencies in foreign exchange markets, in principle without interference by governments. From the mid 1970s, the international financial system also changed in important ways. Earlier, developing countries could turn to international institutions for loans and development assistance, but now they were forced to borrow from Western commercial banks and private lending institutions. This led to periodic debt crises in the developing world and lower incomes and increased poverty, especially in Africa and Latin America. The industrial world was also hit by unemployment that began rising from the mid 1970s and remained high until the early 1990s. From the late 1970s, MNCs also began to shift production operations to low wage Asian countries. China had been cut off from the post-war world economy since its revolution in 1949, but new economic policies in China and the collapse of the Soviet Union and Soviet-style communism in Eastern Europe brought many countries back into the fold of the world economy. Wages were relatively low in countries like China, thus, they became attractive destinations for investment by foreign MNCs competing to capture world markets. Have you noticed that most of the TVs, mobile phones, and toys we see in the shops seem to be made in China? This is because of the low cost structure of the Chinese economy, most importantly, its low wages. The relocation of industry to low-wage countries stimulated world trade and capital flows. The last 2 decades, the world's economic geography has been transformed as countries such as India, China, and Brazil have undergone rapid economic transformation.
Okay, children, we have completed the chapter, The Making of a Global World, and I have enclosed the keynotes and worksheet in the PDF. Kindly note it down, and we'll see in the next class. Thank you.